its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The Warship Killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back to News9 Live. You're watching Global Lens with me, Neha Khanna. Let's now shift our focus to the big story emanating from the Middle East, one that dominated headlines this week. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, has withdrawn its troops from Jenin in the occupied West Bank, ending an intense two-day operation that killed at least 13 Palestinians, drove thousands from their homes and left a trail of destruction in its wake. One Israeli soldier was also killed. The Israeli army claims to have inflicted heavy damage on militant groups in the Jenin refugee camp in an operation that included a series of airstrikes and hundreds of ground troops. This comes after nearly a year and a half of heavy fighting in the West Bank. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to carry out similar operations again if needed, saying we'll eradicate terrorism whenever and wherever we see it, we will strike at it. The Jenin raid was one of the most intense Israeli military operations in the West Bank since an armed Palestinian uprising against Israel's open-ended occupation ended 2 decades ago. Since early 2022, Israel has been carrying out near-daily raids in the West Bank in response to a series of deadly Palestinian attacks. It says the raids are meant to crack down on Palestinian militants and necessary as the Palestinian Authority is too weak. Palestinians say such violence is the inevitable result of 56 years of occupation and the absence of any political process with Israel. They also point to increased West Bank settlement construction and violence by extremist settlers. As the military operation began on Monday, big military bulldozers tore through alleyways, leaving heavy damage to roads and buildings, and thousands of residents fled the camp, seeking safety. Electricity and water were knocked out. The army said the bulldozers were necessary because roads were booby-trapped with explosives. As the troops left, streets were lined by scorched and flattened cars and piles of rubble. The Israeli military says it has confiscated thousands of weapons, bomb-making materials and caches of money. Weapons were found in militant hideouts and civilian areas, in one case beneath a mosque, according to Israel. The withdrawal came hours after a Hamas militant rammed his car into a crowded Tel Aviv bus stop and began stabbing people, wounding 8, including a pregnant woman who reportedly lost her baby. The attacker was killed by an armed bystander. Hamas said the attack was revenge for the Israeli offensive. Militants from Hamas-ruled Gaza also fired 5 rockets towards Israel, which Israel says were intercepted. Israeli jets then struck several sites in Gaza. The year-long spike in violence between the two sides had created a challenge for Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government, which was dominated by ultra-nationalists who've called for tougher action against Palestinians, only to see the fighting worsen. Over 140 Palestinians have been killed this year in the West Bank, and Palestinian attacks targeting Israelis have killed at least 25. The violence has raised warnings from humanitarian groups of a deteriorating situation. Israel's operation in Jenin has drawn sharp reactions. The Palestinian Authority has described it as a war crime. The UN's Human Rights Chief has said the scale of the operation raises a host of serious issues with respect to international human rights norms, including protecting and respecting the right to life. Israel captured the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip in the 1967 Mid-East War. The Palestinians seek those territories for an independent state that they have been fighting for. The roots of violence and hatred between the two sides emanate from a conflict over possession of the land that began more than a century ago. For a while, back in the 1990s, there was hope that peace might come if an independent Palestinian state could be established alongside Israel, referred to as the two-state solution. The attempt failed. Powerful Western countries, including the United States, European Union members and the United Kingdom, still insist that 2 states are the only possible solution. The last American attempt to try to make the idea work collapsed in 2014. And now there's a real danger that Israelis and Palestinians are sliding into an even more violent phase of their long conflict.
Of course, we support Israel's right to self-defense and have condemned the recent terrorist attacks. We would say that the protection of civilians must be prioritized in any military operation, and would urge the IDF to demonstrate restraint in its operation and for all parties to avoid further escalation in both the West Bank and Gaza, both now and in the days ahead, and also call on Israel to adhere to principles of necessity and proportionality when defending their legitimate security interests.
Whoever thinks that such an attack will deter us from continuing our fight against terrorism is wrong. They simply do not know the spirit of the State of Israel. They do not know our government, our citizens, or our fighters. I congratulate our brave fighters who destroyed many terrorist infrastructures in Jenin and thus prevented many attacks.
Let's now get you a story that has made headlines as far as the US-China high-tech war is concerned. Well, a big move by China to restrict exports of some metals widely used in semiconductors, electric vehicles and high-tech industries has ramped up a tech war with the United States and could potentially cause more disruption to global supply chains. A trade war between China and the United States over the future of semiconductors is escalating. China's Commerce Ministry has said from the 1st of August it would control exports of 8 gallium products and 6 germanium products to protect the country's national security interests. A move analysts see as retaliatory action in response to escalating efforts by Washington to curb Beijing's technological advances. Gallium, germanium and other minor metals are widely used in wide bandgap semiconductors, communication equipment, solar panels and electric vehicles. China is the dominant producer of gallium and germanium. In 2022, top importers of China's gallium products were Japan, Germany and the Netherlands. Top importers of germanium products were Japan, France, Germany and the US. Companies are now reacting to this news, with one US semiconductor wafer manufacturer saying it is applying for export permits to assure its investors. The chairman of the Global Mining Association of China has said, and I quote, "China has hit the American trade restrictions where it hurts." He says gallium and germanium are just a couple of the minor metals that are so important for the range of tech products, and China is the dominant producer of most of these metals. It is a fantasy to suggest that another country can replace China in the short or even medium term. Japan has warned it will oppose any violations of World Trade Organization rules and other international agreements in this regard. Shares in some metal producers surged on Tuesday, with Yunnan Linkang Xinyuan germanium industry jumping 10% by the daily upper limit and Yunnan Sheong zinc and germanium company climbing 7%. Last October, the Biden administration in the US unveiled a set of export controls banning Chinese companies from buying advanced chips and chip-making equipment without a license. Chips are vital for everything from smartphones and self-driving cars to advanced computing and weapons manufacturing. US officials have talked about the move as a measure to protect national security interests. And for the curbs to be effective, Washington needed other key suppliers located in the Netherlands and Japan to join, and they did. China eventually retaliated. In April, it launched a cybersecurity probe into Micron before banning the company from selling to Chinese companies working on key infrastructure projects. On Monday, Beijing announced the restrictions on gallium and germanium. China's controls come as Washington mulls new restrictions on the shipment of high-tech microchips to China following a series of curbs in recent years. The US and the Netherlands are also expected to further restrict sales of chip-making equipment to Chinese chip makers as part of efforts to prevent their technology from being used by China's military. Beijing last made a retaliatory move against US pressure on chips in the month of May this year, when it banned some domestic sectors from purchasing products from US memory chip maker Micron. Analysts say they see the export controls as China's second and much bigger countermeasure in the US-China tech war after the Micron ban, and also as a likely response to potential US tightening of an artificial intelligence chip ban. The US is dependent on China for these two critical elements. It imported more than 50% of the gallium and germanium it used in 2021 from China. Eurasia Group analysts have described China's export controls as a warning shot. It's a shot across the bow intended to remind countries, including the US, Japan, and the Netherlands, that China has retaliatory options and thereby to deter them from imposing further restrictions on Chinese access to high-end chips and tools. That's what they say. The United States also imports a fifth of its gallium from the UK and Germany and buys more than 30% of its germanium from Belgium and Germany. Small amounts of gallium, around 10 metric tons in 2021, were produced by Japan, Russia and South Korea. Germany and Kazakhstan also produced it in the past. After prices rallied in 2020 and 2021, Germany announced that it would begin primary gallium production once again. Gallium is a soft silvery metal and is easy to cut with a knife. It's commonly used to produce compounds that are key materials in semiconductors and light-emitting diodes. Germanium, I beg your pardon, is a hard greyish white and brittle metalloid that is used in the production of optical fibers that can transmit light and electronic data. The export controls have drawn comparisons with China's reported attempts in early 2021 to restrict exports of rare earth metals, a group of 17 elements for which China controls more than half of the global supply. Gallium and germanium do not belong to this group of minerals. Like rare earths, they can be expensive to mine or produce. China is the world's leading producer of both gallium and germanium. The country accounted for 98% of the global production of gallium and 68% of the refinery production of germanium last year. The metals are used in high-speed computer chips and in the defense and renewable energy sectors. Germanium is key to fiber optic cables and also used in high-speed computer chips and plastics as well as infrared radiation. The metal and its oxides are used in military applications like night vision devices and satellite imagery sensors. It's also important for low-carbon technologies such as solar cells. Gallium at 99.99% purity in China was assessed at 1,775 yuan or $245 a kilo on Monday, up 5.97% from the previous session. And China's germanium price was last at 9,150 yuan or $1,264 per kilo. Rare earth magnets are used in wind turbines, electric vehicles, and defense applications like laser-guided missiles and many other high-tech devices. China has hinted at multiple times that it could crimp rare earth exports, including in recent years. All right. Let's now turn our attention to another story that has garnered a lot of attention. Well, it impacts you, me, all of us. So you think it is hot? Very hot? Too hot? Does the earth feel like an oven? Well, listen to this. On Monday, the 3rd of July, the world experienced its hottest day ever. We mean hottest in human history, according to the US National Centers for Environmental Prediction. The mercury skyrocketed to the highest recorded average temperature ever. That's 17.01 degrees Celsius or 62.62 degrees Fahrenheit. That topped the previous record of 16.92 degrees Celsius from August 2016. Southern United States has been reeling under an intense heat dome in recent weeks. China is experiencing a strong heat wave with temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius. North Africa has seen temperatures near 50 degrees Celsius, and Antarctica, which is currently in its winter, has been registering abnormally high temperatures as well. Make no mistake, this is a climate emergency. Climate scientist Friederike Otto of the Grantham Institute for Climate Change and the Environment at Britain's Imperial College London has said, and I quote, "This is not a milestone we should be celebrating. It's a death sentence for people and ecosystems." And the news gets worse. The World Meteorological Organization, the UN Agency for Weather, has warned that governments around the globe must prepare for more extreme weather events and record temperatures in the coming months, thanks to the onset of El Nino, the warming phenomenon. El Nino is a natural climate pattern in the tropical Pacific Ocean that brings warmer than average sea surface temperatures and has a major influence on weather across the globe, impacting billions of people. The World Meteorological Organization says the onset of El Nino will greatly increase the likelihood of breaking temperature records and triggering more extreme heat in many parts of the world and in the ocean. The declaration is a signal to governments around the world to mobilize preparations to limit the impact on our health, our ecosystems and our economies. The last 3 years have been among the warmest on record, even with El Nino's sister phase, La Nina, which is marked by cooler than average ocean temperatures. A double whammy of a very strong El Nino and human-caused warming from the burning of fossil fuels had earlier led to 2016 becoming the hottest year on record. But this is the first El Nino to develop in 7 years, and coupled with human-caused global heating, it has pushed 2023 to break 2016's heat record. Along with increased ocean warming, El Nino events are usually associated with increased rainfall in parts of South America, the southern United States, the Horn of Africa, and Central Asia. It can also amplify severe droughts, heat waves, and wildfires over Australia, Indonesia, parts of southern Asia, Central America, and northern South America. Other impacts include dangerous tropical cyclones in the Pacific and the mass bleaching of fragile coral reefs. In India, a major rice-producing nation, El Nino can weaken the monsoon and result in less rainfall. Remember, it is rainfall that the country relies on to fill its aquifers and grow crops. El Nino this year could also negatively impact the global economic growth. A recent study says $5.7 trillion in global income losses resulted from the 1997-98 El Nino and $4.1 trillion in losses from the 1982-83 El Nino. The world could also be temporarily pushed past 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming above pre-industrial levels, a key tipping point beyond which chances of extreme flooding, droughts, wildfires and food shortages could increase dramatically. In the Paris Climate Agreement, countries pledged to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees and preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial temperatures. But the world has already seen around 1.2 degrees Celsius of warming as humans continue to burn fossil fuels and produce planet-heating pollution. Now, according to this UN agency, there is a 66% likelihood that the annual average near-surface global temperature between 2023 and 2027 will temporarily be more than 1.5 degrees Celsius for at least a year. A host of climate records have already been broken in 2023, with soaring temperatures, unusually hot oceans, and record high levels of carbon pollution in the atmosphere, and record low levels of Antarctic ice. Across Asia, Europe and the Americas, early and prolonged heat waves this year have killed people and animals and crops, sparked concerns about food security and water scarcity, and led to unprecedented wildfires.
So the key lesson from the report is that the tropical Pacific Ocean is currently experiencing El Nino condition. And this is a result of rapid and substantive change both in the atmosphere and in the ocean. So the impact of the El Nino event on global temperature is likely to surge the global temperature because El Nino will add up to the anthropogenic warming and likely to increase the global temperature. So what we might see in the next month from June to September, from July to September, we will have a surge of dryness area over Australia, the maritime continent, and also in another part of South America.
The world's hottest day ever in the entire human history was coming next. As I said earlier, scientists are warning this is not a milestone to be celebrated. This should worry us. This should terrify us. But are we going to get our act together? Are our governments going to swing into action or continue to be comatose as they have all this while? We leave you with that thought. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains